This is Tuesday, June 9th, 2015. Today, the Del Mar Board of Regents had a meeting. In attendance today for the public comment section was Mr. Jack Gordy. You will hear his 3-minute comment after the introduction. We have posted several things on the show today, and we're going to make some comments on them. One is the bad debt write-off and the correlation to the student count. The student count, according to the financial statements issued by Del Mar College, has been declining. That's the number of students has been declining. Now, a lot of times they will issue statements saying that the contact hours or something to that effect has been going up. The student count has been going down. We have taken numbers presented in their annual financial statements. They get an audit. These are audited financial statements. That's where we got all the bad debt numbers as well. The bad debt write-off, the bad debt allowance, those are all their numbers. Now, they have difficulty when we file a Public Information Act request finding those numbers and reconciling to their own numbers, but they are in fact their numbers. Thanks for joining us.
Be sensitive to the folks we have that want to do public comments. I'm going to go ahead and we'll do a public comment period now, and then when we come back after the second half of the closed section, we'll be glad to do another public comment, assuming someone hasn't spoken already. So at this point, I'm going to temporarily open up public comments. I do have one card. Mr. Gordy, if you would like to come forward, and just remind you have 3 minutes for your presentation. Thank you.
Yes, my name is Jack Gordy, and I live at 4118 Bray Drive. All of you got a letter from me regarding the subject I'm going to talk about. And no one up there can say, or out here anywhere, can say that the information is not correct, because we got it from Del Mar, so it is correct. It's something, like I said in the first paragraph, that this board of directors needs to start asking questions about. Don't ignore it, and don't just let it continue. From what I've been told, it's already planned on continuing for the next couple of years. The accounting department writes off bills that's owed to Del Mar, and they don't even try to collect it. They don't even send them a bill and say, pay us. They just say, oh, don't worry about it, and write it off. Now, this board of regents shouldn't accept that, because we're talking about taxpayer money. They wrote off here, this is what we got records of, $2,838,327. Like I said, they didn't even send them a letter to try to collect it. The taxpayers, they raise our taxes, but they just, don't worry about that money that's owed to us. The taxpayers will give us more. All we got to do is ask for it. So we're asking this board of regents to find out why it was written off. And like I said there, all of you were elected to represent the taxpayers and to make sure that Del Mar does the right thing. When somebody tells you something's wrong, then you should investigate it, not just ignore it. You can't say that you didn't know about it already, because it's been on the news, Channel 6. It's been on there at least 2 times already. So it's been covered by the news media. And like I said in the last paragraph, if you're going to just ignore it, it's time to step down and let somebody else take your seat that will question it and do something about it. Because that's what you were elected to do, represent the taxpayers. And like I said in the last paragraph in red, all of you should be asking the Del Mar Board of Regents how he can justify the write-offs when he knows that it's not right to do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gordy. Do we have any other public comments at this point? Okay. So we're going to go back into closed session for our second part at 3:32. So we'll do the language again, even though we read it before. Glad to. We're going to go back into closed session under Texas Government Code D.
We just heard Mr. Gordy presenting his 3-minute public comment to the Board of Regents at Del Mar College. His concern is the $2.83 million bad debt write-off. Now that's the amount of the debt that was written off as uncollectible. We continue to hear comments from administration saying it's student related. Well, some of it is. That's absolutely true. Much of it is not. Hundreds of thousands of dollars is third-party bad debt. Written off, not collected, no certified letters sent, no litigation filed. Bad debt that was just written off. That's your money, taxpayers. It's gone. Mr. Gordy has alerted the Board of Regents. Now, they should have already been aware of it if any of them live in Corpus Christi, which they do have to. If they watch the news, Channel 6 has run several stories on it. The Caller Times ran stories on it when the Del Mar administration wanted $26.7 million for 7 general ledger account detail printouts, which amounted to less than 200 pages. There's been stories run on it. The Del Mar Board of Regents has to be aware of it, but Mr. Gordy just made certain they are. And he is concerned. Thank you for listening to this. Now we're going to continue with a pre-recorded session with Dr. Sang Sang. Thank you.
Del Mar Board of Regents members, and then we'll go to some other items here. The chair of the whole thing is one Trey McCampbell. He's an at-large member. We've got 5 districts and then 4 at-large members. Okay? So he's at-large. He works for American Bank. He's an executive with the bank, and his term expires next year in 2016. So we're going to have races coming up here pretty quick. So since he is an accountant by admission, and we've got this accounting irregularities at Del Mar College, then examine who's going to run at large this next time and really make up your mind, and then get off your backsides and go vote. This is your money, folks. It's serious business. And then we've got Mrs. Elva Estrada. She's the first vice chair of District 3, and her term expires in 2018. And then we have Susan Hutchison, the second vice chair, District 2, and I think she expires this coming year too. So she's an attorney, and just remember, she's the one that wanted the full 280 some odd million bucks, and said she couldn't understand why taxpayers wouldn't want to go for it. Then we've got a chiropractor, Dr. Nick Domi. He's just re-elected this last go around. His term's up in 2020. I helped him get on the first 6 years he was there. This is his second term, and he's gone to the far side as far as I'm concerned. So, but he's too far out to worry about. The next one that's going to be up this time, there'll be 3 of them, I think, is Jim Boggs. Now he's an architect. He works for the city, and he's District 5, which you're in.
That's my district.
That's your district. Okay. And he's I don't think he's going to run again. I think he's had enough. Yeah, he's a true senior citizen. And then we've got Sandra Messbarger, and that's the one that Jack Gordy got into the tussle with the other day. She's at large. Her term's up in 2018, so there's not much hope there in the short run. Then we have Gabe Rivas. Now, I don't know what Miss or Mrs. Messbarger does for a living. If you go into the Del Mar College website, you can get a list of these people, and it says click here for their bio, so you can get their biography on that. Now, old Gabe Rivas has been there almost as long as Guy Watts. He's a photographer around here, and his term is 2018. Then we just elected, you people, not me, we just elected Carol A. Scott. she's good until 2020. She's the one that came off as, I think, the president, they call it, of CCISD. And you can see how prepared students are there, so I'm a little skeptical when we've got somebody of that caliber on Del Mar College over here. I better be quiet, okay? Her husband is Mark Scott with the city council, and Carol's got a PR company, and Mr. Scott, every time somebody would show a desire to come in here, like Las Brisas Energy Center and some of these other organizations, she wound up being their PR rep.
Strange coincidence.
Yeah, and he did not vote against or did not abstain on the votes when they supported the Las Brisas Energy Center because she was the PR person.
He didn't recuse himself?
No. And then we've got Mr. Guy Watts. He's been taking some hits here lately. He's been on the board as long as I've been at Del Mar College. His term is 2020. He just ran. He was at large, and then he's now District 4. He switched and ran for District 4.
And in fact, he beat the incumbent dramatically in that election.
Yeah, he did. So, you know, if you want to know their bios and stuff, just go into the Del Mar website and put in Board of Regents members, and you'll get this whole list. And then you can, if you got a good computer there, you can click for their biography and find out how much academic background these people have got. As far as I can tell, other than Elmer Estrada, she was with one of the school districts, I think. I don't know if she was principal or not,
Okay.
but that's about as close as anybody comes to academics that's on that board. And they're over there directing.
And that board position is a big obligation. It's a 6-year term.
Yeah.
They meet every month, and then they have workshops.
Mhm.
So it's time consuming. But they have this $90 million budget, and based on what I've done and what you've done, I'm not convinced that they understand the budget.
They don't.
I am not convinced at all.
The only one that should or would be Mr. McCampbell, and he's been silent on these issues.
And it's not like we haven't brought it to their attention.
Thanks, Channel 6.
So we're letting them know what the problems are.
Sure.
And my impression is, not only are they not doing anything, the last interview was with Dr. Sloan, and if you could follow that explanation, you're a lot more competent than I am.
And hey, if you couldn't follow it, there's not a prayer in this world I would be able to.
After you finished explaining it, I said, what in the world was he talking about?
Well, that's what I saw when I saw it. I said, say what? What are you talking about?
And that follows the original interview for when they issued the $26.7 million letter,
Right.
and they had Claudia, I believe.
Yeah.
They interviewed her, and she said over and over again, how many times can I say it was a mathematical error?
Right.
So here we are, we're community college, they teach math there, right?
It's Del Mar College math.
Okay.
If you'd like an explanation real quick, I can tell you, because I had a vice president of instruction that had a talk with me because I had signed up for the summer teaching in an overload. And he said, well, I'm not going to approve any overloads for the summer. And I said, well, you know, the class is already made. What are you going to do? Well, we're just going to get somebody else to pay it because you're making too much money. And some of your fellow faculty members and administrators are upset about that. So I said, now wait a minute. I said, that's probably one of the stupidest things I've ever had anybody tell me. I'm doing overload classes for exactly 1/3 of my normal pay, and I'm getting rich doing overloads. I said, give me a break.
Now, this guy was serious?
Yeah, that's Del Mar math. You can't even digest that, can you?
Well, and I'm thinking, I know they teach accounting because I know one of the accounting professors over there, and I also know that she knows what she's doing.
That's right.
And I really, they have good professors.
Oh, yes, they do.
Now,
Got some very fine peer group members over there.
Now, I'm thinking that maybe some of the administrators need to take that accounting course.
Well, if you've got the chief financial officer that's never had an accounting course in his life, he's Dr. Sloan. He's got it's called an EDD, Doctor of Education, which I know some very fine people, very competent people that hold that degree. It is not at the level of a PhD by any stretch of the imagination. And, but he's got an EDD in agricultural education from Clemson University.
A fine school?
Oh, yeah.
Probably that's an agricultural school.
Yeah, that's the South Carolina.
So,
Yeah, Auburn's Alabama.
so it's a fine agricultural school, a fine degree from there.
Right.
It's like, I've got a Master's of Science in Accountancy.
Right.
I have never applied for an engineering position
Right.
because I'm not trained in engineering.
Hello.
And,
I'm not an accountant, you know.
well, you're pretty close now.
I'm learning. This has been quite an education. I'm just waiting for you to send me the bill.
So if you're educated in a discipline and then you elect to get out of that discipline and do something that you have no idea, no concept of what you're doing, you're probably going to have a difficult time accomplishing
I
it.
would think so.
Okay.
And, you know, little by little, he used to run the entire school, and now they've stripped all this away and that away and this away. You know, it's going over to the human resources person.
I see the person that keeps getting the responsibility, and you and I've dealt with her a lot, and I'm thinking, whoa, is she as qualified as he, or I just don't know. And then I see the $90 million, I'm thinking, wow, she's going to be over a sizable chunk of that. And I believe Dr. Sloan is over mostly the construction now,
Right.
and maybe the maintenance, the lawn mowing and stuff. And
He's
then
the one that got us
$80,000 contract, $82,000.
Yeah, he's the one that got us into that custodial, and then that other $13,000, $14,000 a month with the groundskeepers. But who was that? Johnny Mathis had the old song, "It's Not For Me to Sing."
Well, it's freedom of speech as long as you don't say too much.
Just Mel Brothers, yeah. So,
Speaking of freedom of speech, since we're here, I'd like to just go over this. There's several statutes. I think there's at least 3 that I'm aware of that cover recording public meetings.
right.
I'm looking at the Texas wiretapping law, which is a statute. And that's part of the government code. And the public meeting part, I'm going to paraphrase. I've got it here, but I'm just going to paraphrase it. Sound and video recording devices may be used at public meetings. Texas Government Code 551.023B. So, if you're at a public meeting and you want to tape it,
Right.
now, they say there can be some restrictions on it, and I'm thinking based on reading this, that you can't go up and put the camera right in the face of the
That's right.
speaker. But you can videotape
Right.
legally. In fact,
Well,
you
that's-
can't be prohibited
Right.
from videotaping a public meeting.
Well, that one that you just read, the 551, is the Open Meetings Act.
Okay,
That's where that number comes from.
okay.
And that particular one, which was what, 023?
Yes, it is.
I pulled it up, I printed it out, I read every word twice of the Open Meetings Act of Texas. And it states quite clearly in that particular section that you can audio or videotape it, and then there, by any means that you want. The only restrictions would be as the people in charge of that meeting have the right to show you where to position your equipment and make sure it's not going to be a bother. Otherwise, nobody can prevent you from doing it.
And I pull up the Texas wiretapping law because I've used this for decades now. And it's code section 16.02. And I'm going to paraphrase again, but Texas wiretapping law is a one-party consent law.
Right.
So basically, if you're a party to a conversation, let's say a telephone call,
Mhm.
you're on the other end and somebody else is on one end and you're on the other end, you're a party to it.
Right.
You don't have to tell anybody.
Nope.
It's a one-party consent. So if you're in a meeting and you're part of that meeting, even if it's not a public meeting, if you're part of the meeting,
Right.
one-party consent.
That's right.
You can consent to tape it.
That's right.
You don't have to tell anyone. So I'm bringing this up because I took my video camera into a hearing at Delma. And August, I'm not sure what his last name is.
Alfonso, I think.
Alfonso. He was in charge of this meeting, and he's always seemed like a nice guy. But he told us to shut our video cameras off. There were two of us, Jack Gordon and myself. He said, shut your video cameras off until I say this. So we shut them off, and then he announced that there would be no videotaping allowed. It was against Delmar policy. Now, I can say that this is a Texas statute. This is not a college policy.
Sure.
I'm going to be amazed if a college policy precedes a Texas statute.
It can't supersede it.
I'm sorry, supersede. It can't. That's the law.
That's right.
Now, not only did Mr. Alfonso, tell us that we couldn't turn our video cameras on, somebody sent the police officer over to make sure we shut the video camera up.
That was the PR person, Claudia Jackson.
Okay, Claudia sent the police officer over to prevent us from doing what the Texas state statute says we're allowed to do.
That's right. You got it. That was a public meeting.
So I believe a law was violated, and I believe it's this law that I just held up. So that law was violated against me and Mr. Gordy
That's right.
at the insistence of an officer of Delmar College.
Right. And the police officer that they
The police
hired.
officer
Now,
instructed.
you know, why would a hearing like that require the college to hire a police officer, a Corpus Christi police officer, to go in there and keep an eye on things?
Let me just speculate. It's not required, but that's why we have a $90 million budget. That is why instruction costs are less than 40%.
That's right.
Because we're doing things like that at Delmar that don't make any sense in the world.
Well, we've seen that at other hearings at Delmar College where the cops were sitting there.
Two of them sometimes.
Yeah, two and three of them at times.
And we pull in an outside counsel from San Antonio. She does a lot of work, a lot of preparation, and then she was the only attorney in that room, and that statute was violated.
Right.
Doctor, if you and I know that statute, how much, when did you graduate from law school?
I've never.
I haven't
I-
either.
I've said over the past couple of years, maybe I'll go back to law school. It's, I mean, if you can make that kind of money and not know what you're doing, I mean, that's a heck of a deal, folks, isn't it?
It seems to me that, and I might be incorrect in this, but she said she was representing the college.
She did.
And if you're representing the college, you probably don't want them to violate Texas state statutes in the process.
I don't as a taxpayer. I resent it that she was hired to do that.
So,
And it was my hearing.
yeah, it sure was.
And then she violated the Public Information Act.
Wasn't that over and over?
Yeah,
Wasn't that interesting?
Yeah, we'll discuss that at a different show. That one ain't over, as they say.
Well, I don't think this one's over either.
No, that one's not over.
Yeah, and some people are going to say we're being extreme by holding these people accountable. Well, they're accountable to at least follow the law.
Well, if somebody goes in and shoots your wife, husband, kid, or whatever, do you want to hold that perpetrator accountable, yes or no? I mean, the laws are the laws, folks. They're there for a reason.
And if they start violating little laws, now, isn't that the way Hitler came to power?
I think so.
Right. And people were called extreme then when they went against Hitler, but of course he exterminated them anyway.
Oh, yeah.
So,
Just off to the gas chamber,
and-
which is humorous at Del Mar.
holiday concert.
Yeah, with references. We've discussed that before.
So, Del Mar's, they violated it. It certainly appeared to me that that was a direct violation of the Texas state statute.
It was,
And
definitely.
in a meeting where Del Mar had an attorney on retainer, hourly retainer, and nothing was done, and the police officer was sent over to violate the law.
That's right.
Now, I wouldn't expect the police officer to know that law unless he had a JD like the guy up in B County has.
Right.
And I suspect he didn't have a JD. He was following instructions, and they were bad instructions. But the attorney was sitting there, and I do expect her, as a representative of the taxpayers,
Right.
to not allow Del Mar to get in a position that they are potentially liable for violating Texas state statutes.
Yeah, yeah. It's not the first time I've observed that with that
You know,
attorney.
that's interesting. Me either. That is interesting. That would reference back to a couple of years ago when we heard about the cover-up of the death of a patient,
Mhm.
and we have the testimony about that. She was there,
Right.
as was the former VPI. And I know that if I were in the VPI's position, I would have been horrified to hear that, and I would have done something at that point to make sure that everything was disclosed and that never happened again. I didn't see any reaction.
Well, the biggest problem with that, Ed, and I shouldn't say this, was we were cutting into his sleep time over there at Starbucks in the afternoon.
And I believe Starbucks revenue went way down during that
Oh,
period.
yeah, it did, because he wasn't over there snoozing with a computer on his chest. So,
But he's no longer with us.
oh, thank goodness.
So
That's the good news.
So I have some problems with things that are going on. And the problems I have are that we seem to be the only ones concerned about the money.
Yeah.
Now, granted, there are some people that are contacting us through emails that are concerned. But
Well, the comeuppance is gonna be when the Corpus Christi Taxpayers Association shows up in mass.
and if they show up in mass at the same time that the state controller's auditors division shows up, that would be quite a coincidence.
Yeah, plus Channel 6. Come on, Rick, where are you?
Oh, Rick's on top
I
of
don't know.
it. Doctor, I think we've probably gone over the hour.
Probably so, but it's been a pleasure, Ed. Thanks for inviting me.
It's been great. We've got some great information, and we will continue having
Yes,
great information.
yes, I will. I'll promise you that.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Good, the battery lasted.
Okay.